Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of Imperial as One's Belonging series. It's a series where we explore the lived experiences of individuals from the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities. It's an opportunity for them to share some of the journeys which have helped them to gain their sense of identity and their sense of belonging. And this week, I say it every week, we have an extra special guest, and I mean extra special guest. And her name is Leanne Armitage. Now, Leanne is a medical doctor. She's a professional speaker. She's an author. She's a co-founder of the Armitage Foundation. And you know what? She's only so young. I can't believe how she's managed to do so much in such a short space of time. So, Leanne, I'm going to kick off by asking you that question. Can you tell me what it is that has given you your sense of identity, your sense of belonging as you've been growing up?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I just want to say thank you for welcoming me onto this podcast. It's a real privilege to be here. I know that you've interviewed some amazing people, so I'm very grateful to have been chosen by you, Wayne.
No.
So in terms of what gives me my sense of belonging, for me, it would have to be my faith. I came to faith to know Jesus when I was 15 years old, and that really gave me a deep sense of identity, because that's when I discovered that I have a purpose. So at that age, I started to think about, what is my purpose? What am I here to do in the world? And some other events happened which kind of gave me a vision to become a doctor. And also, as I was progressing through this journey, I started to realize that I had a real passion for empowering people through speaking. I had a real kind of social activist kind of spirit, in the sense that if I see issues, I don't just like talking about them. I'm like, okay, what are we going to do to actually make a difference? And so I'd say it's those kind of things broadly which have helped to give me a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, and a sense of purpose.
So tell us a little bit about that journey to faith, because you said because it's something which is so pertinent in your life.
Yeah.
It's what's give. How did you come about embarking on this faith journey?
Yeah,
If you don't
it's
mind me
interesting
asking.
because I didn't come from a home where there was
Mhm.
any kind of faith. I
Mhm.
didn't grow up with my father. My father is a Muslim, but I didn't meet my dad until I was 19. And my
Mhm.
mother would probably be described as agnostic, in that she believed in a God, kind of, but she would never say anything. But I had an older sister who was basically like my, or is my real life hero, and she was exploring faith and exploring different things, so perhaps that kind of had a bit of an influence in me. So I'd been to different kind of churches or different environments of faith, and when I was 15 I just had the desire to go to church one day, and that was an encounter that kind of changed my life, because I then started a journey. And around the age of 15 I also witnessed the aftermath of a stabbing, in which a young man may have lost his life. I don't know if he died or not. And that, coupled with my faith, gave me a deep desire to want to become a doctor. Specifically at that age, I thought I wanted to be a trauma surgeon. And because as I said, I've got that kind of social activist spirit. After witnessing that event, I remember looking around at the crowd, thinking everybody's just standing here staring. Who's actually going to do something to make a difference? And then I remember feeling disempowered, thinking, what can I do? I'm just a 15-year-old girl. So that evening I went home, and I remember, like, I grew up in Southeast London between Camberwell and Peckham, where it wasn't uncommon to hear about young men losing their lives. But this particular incident hit me in such a deep way. And the reason for this is because what happened is I was coming home with my sister that evening, and we saw a helicopter landing, and I absolutely love helicopters. I got so excited, and I said to my sister, we need to go and watch it land. So she agreed, and when we got to the scene, I'm there full of excitement to see a red helicopter that's landing on my end. And then I realized, that, oh my goodness, it's not landing for a good reason. It's landing because a young man has potentially lost his life. And that's why this incident like marked me in a deep way. It's because I went from being elated to feeling a deep sense of grief. And then I just felt like I need to do something. So as I said, that evening I went home and I remember just going to my bedroom where I prayed and asked God, what can I do to make a difference? And then the idea came to me that if I aspired to become a trauma surgeon, that would give me a platform to go into environments where young men are involved in knife and gun crime in the hope of inspiring them to be and to do better. So it was such a strong emotive driving force because it wasn't just about me, it was about my community. It was me being able to translate that frustration, that grief, that hurt into something meaningful. It was my way of processing those emotions. And because I believed that God was kind of empowering me along this journey, it gave me like such a tenacity and a drive, like a ferocious drive. And it's the reason why I've been able to overcome so many of the challenges that I have to stand as the woman that I stand as today and the woman that I'm still becoming.
Wow, that in itself is just amazing.
Thank you.
That the whole idea, the way that you described it, going from that elation of seeing the red helicopter to the point of the recognition that actually there's nothing to celebrate here.
Yeah.
There really is nothing to celebrate. And but there's one thing about having those experiences. It's another thing acting upon that and making them into a reality. What was it that helped? What do you think it is that had helped you to do that transition from I want to do something, but this is what I'm going to do? You've said you've got an activist spirit, but what do you think propelled you forward?
I think it's probably multifaceted. I think that I always had a drive for success from a young age. And I
Right.
grew up in an environment where, I grew up on a council estate in Peckham. At the time, it was one of the most deprived areas in London. And I had an understanding that I wasn't coming from the most privileged background. But when you're growing up in that, it's what's normal to you, because not to say that that's abnormal, but that was kind of my reality at the time. But as I said, I knew there was still greater to achieve in the world. And I always had this kind of mindset that no matter what I do, I'm going to be successful. But part of my desire to succeed was driven by a desire to not be like the things around me that I didn't like. So I didn't want to be a stereotype. I didn't want to be a young mother. I remember once somebody said to my sister that, oh, Leanne will probably be a teenage mother. And my sister got so angry. And like it's those kind of stereotypes. I never wanted to be like that. So that became a force that made me want to be different. I want to do things differently, want to succeed, want to excel. But I think another thing is, from a young age, I had lots of opportunities to travel through different things. And I remember having opportunities to go to Africa through scholarships or various things. But to be fair, those were kind of later in my teens. But nonetheless, I say this because I understood that I had a level of privilege just by being in the UK, just by being in a Western country. And I wanted to make the most of my opportunities and the things that I had around me. And I believe there was something great inside of me, and I wanted to somehow see that realized.
And this, guys, I'm going to just warn you, this may go on for more than an hour, this conversation, right? Because I'm already feeling inspired from what you said. There's a point which you made, which I just want to develop on, which was about the relationship that you have with your sister, because she seems to be quite pivotal in your story.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
is. She
Yeah.
is.
So give us a flavor of who your sister is and how she's inspired you. You called her,
Yeah.
she's your hero. So give us
Yeah.
a
I mean, my sister is I don't want to get emotional, but it's so difficult to put into words because, sometimes it's only with when you've got a greater level of wisdom and force, or not even foresight, but it's only when you're at a point in your life. So let me rephrase this. When you're young, right, and somebody's doing great things for you, you don't often recognize what they're doing because you're just a young person. It's just what it is. But
Mhm.
it's usually later on in life when you look back and reflect, you're like, oh my goodness, my sister actually did all of that for me? Like, where did she get that wisdom from? Why did she have that desire? Because she almost was like a motherly figure in some senses, in that she was very vested in my education. She was very empowering towards me. She supported me in anything that I wanted to do, and she helped to build my self-esteem at some of those crucial stages in life. She helped to guide me. She encouraged me to kind of respect myself as a woman, to like not get involved with guys that I don't need to get involved with. So she kind of nurtured me in several different areas. And I think, you know, when I became head girl of my secondary school, that was the first time in my life I experienced anxiety like I'd never experienced before, because the role terrified me because of the public speaking element. And because it was a role for a whole year and you were expected to do several speeches during that year, it was really, really tough for me as a young person experiencing that. And my sister would, you know, she would celebrate me after a speech, even if I felt like I did a bad job. She just made me feel so special and so great. And yeah, she's just guided me. She's the reason that I got a bursary or scholarship to go to boarding school. She's the reason I studied at the school that I went to for secondary school, which in Lambeth was outstanding at the time. She's the reason for so many different great things. I'm not saying there weren't other people in my life that didn't empower me, but my sister in particular was just somebody that I connected to on multiple levels. And yeah, she's amazing.
Right, you know what? I'm going to line up. This might be the first of a two-part series. I might have to get your sister in and get her viewpoint as well. But and I'm sure she'll say exactly the same thing about you in the nurturing process. So you also just mentioned there about how she helped to guide you to get to a boarding school, that you were a head girl. So success was written in your pathway, but you had to make that success happen.
Exactly. And what's interesting, Wayne, is that like having to like battle against self-doubt and like fear and all of these things, like even though it's like your path is kind of showing and demonstrating that you're on the right trajectory, I was still challenged at every stage. And even till today, I'll have moments where I'm like, oh my goodness, what is happening? And it's like, if somebody objectively views your life, they're like, what is wrong with you? Everything's going to be okay. But when you're the individual going through it, sometimes, you know, you experience all these emotions and you don't often see yourself as others might see you. So yeah, it's still been a journey and still is a journey.
Yeah, no, fantastic. At boarding school then, because you've gone from one extreme then, although you
Yeah.
were at an outstanding school, it was an outstanding school which wasn't in the best of areas. And
No.
now you've gone to a boarding school where you've got privilege, etc., all around you, right? What was that like for you growing up where you were? How
Yeah.
did you then fit in with?
Boarding school was quite challenging for me. It was a blessing, but a challenge at the same time. It was challenging because it's like, you know, it's obviously a great achievement to get a bursary or a scholarship or whatever. And I knew that it was an opportunity that was there to serve and to help me. But by the same token, it was challenging because I came from my environment to this new environment. And at times I did feel judged. I felt insecure. Most people knew that I was on a bursary, which it felt awkward because it's like it wasn't like this is who the bursary student is, but things were written in such a way where people could know it was me. So it was like anonymous, but not anonymous. And you know, at times I just felt really insecure. And having those kind of emotions and feelings is not healthy, and people experience that at multiple levels, imposter syndrome in different kind of areas of life, and it's not a healthy kind of mindset to have, because it's very disempowering and it makes you see yourself as less than, and it impacts your identity. And so I was having this fight inside where I knew I had greatness inside of me. I knew that God has given me a great vision for my life, but I'm in an environment where at times I'm feeling really insecure and small and having to kind of fight against that. But I actually say that was probably one of the best experiences in my life, because from a young age, it forced me to really look introspectively and to ask myself, you know, what is my value based on? What makes me Leanne? Is it because I grew up in a single parent home? Is it because I come from a council estate? Is it because of, you know, I don't come from a wealthy background? Or is it based on the potential that is inside of me? Is it based on my character and what I'm bringing and showing up in the world? And, you know, I had to really go on that journey of building my self-esteem and understanding that you can't put me in a box and you can't define me based on my background. I have the power to manifest and create the destiny that I want to. And yeah, it was challenging, but a blessing, because I was building that confidence, you know. And so as I was building that self-esteem, I was becoming able to take on opportunities and to say, do you know what? Yeah, I want to build a charity, and why can I not do that? I want to write a book, and nobody can tell me that I can't do that. So it was that was a convoluted answer, but I hope I painted the picture.
I got goosebumps on my back right now. It was beautiful. No, that some people think that you can't, if you go through discomfort, it's a bad thing. But in order for you to get to where you need to get to, sometimes you have to go through
You
that
have to.
discomfort, because that's
Yeah,
where your growth begins.
absolutely. And it taught me that as well. It taught me to be comfortable with being in uncomfortable environments. Like, we live in a society where we're taught to be led too much by our feelings and our emotions, but you have to be led by principles, because your feelings and emotions will tell you to run away from the very thing that you need to lean into to help you to get to your next level. If I listened to my feelings and my emotions, I wouldn't have ever got a microphone to speak on a stage again. The first speech I did as head girl, my hands were shaking, the paper was shaking, and I did it alongside a year 6, and I was in year 11, and she was fine. And you know, one of my friends said after, she said, Leanne, you look like you were dancing on the stage. And I went, hey, I said, God, I don't want to do this anymore. But, you know, if I had listened to that fear, I wouldn't have spoken on some of the stages that I've spoken on today. I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't be empowering and inspiring people. So we have to really learn to be led by values and principles and vision, and not by emotions. And, you know, to your point about coming out your comfort zone, I constantly strive to do that. You know, I look at things and ask myself, what am I going to gain? What value is this going to add to my life? How is this in alignment with my purpose and my vision? And if it is, I have to agree to do something, irrespective of how scary it may feel.
So getting into, I'm just, I'm not too worried about time, but I just want to move us on a little bit in terms of, you've gone through the secondary school head girl experience, gone to not to the boarding school. Now that you had that purpose to go to university, right, to go and become a doctor, what was that like then for you? Who were you selecting, and what was your experience when you were going through medical
Yeah.
school?
I mean, the first time I applied to medical school, I got rejected from everywhere without a single invitation to interview. And that was really challenging for multiple reasons. Firstly, I felt like I'd let everybody down. I was like, man, 50K has been invested in my education. I'm the first recipient of this bursary, and I haven't got an offer at medical school. And just, you know, so many people are vested in my journey. So that was challenging. And what was extremely challenging is that once I got all the rejections, I was like, okay, I'm just going to take a gap here and reapply. But then on my final maths exam, like, maths is not like history or English. You can't like just write stuff in a way where you're going to try to collect points. You either get the answer wrong or right. And I was thoroughly convinced that I didn't get an A in maths, which you need to get into medical school. And so I remember kind of going through this few months where I felt so hollow inside, and because I was young and I couldn't see the bigger picture of life, I just felt like, oh my God, what am I going to do with my life? And I remember during that time, I took a lot of comfort from Dr. Benjamin Carson's book, Gifted Hands,
Yeah.
because his story felt so comparable to my story in different ways. And he also had a strong faith in God. And I was able to see miracles in that book of how God had helped him to get through medical school and helped him to, you know, believe in himself and to get to the stage he got to in his life. You know, at his time, he was the world's best neurosurgeon, successfully separated the first ever successful operation for Siamese twins. And yeah, I just held on to those little buckets of hope. And to my surprise, I did get the grades that I needed to get. And this time when I applied to medical school, I made sure I went to all of the universities, the open days, etc. And I got 3 medical offers, and I wanted to stay in London. So the one university I had applied to in London, which I got, was St. George's. And so I studied at St. George's in Tooting.
Let me just ask one quick question then. One quick question, because I'm looking at this differential. Because
Yeah.
at the moment, what you had said is that the first time you applied, you didn't get one offer. The second time, the main difference I would have suspected is that you've got the grades, right? But what would you say was the difference between your first application
Yeah.
and the second
So
application?
with medical school, you have to do admissions exams
Yeah.
on top of the grades.
Mhm.
And I think what made me a weaker applicant is that I didn't score as highly on the one of the like IQ test type thing.
Mhm.
Like they use it to sieve people out basically. So I think that didn't act in my favor, and I probably didn't score high enough. Because with I don't know how it is now, but back then different universities had different cutoff scores, and I don't think I was aware of that. So I
Mhm.
did a bit more research the second time round, and I kind of was a bit more strategic in applying to some one university that didn't use that as a scoring system, only read your personal statement. So number one, I was a bit more strategic. I did better in the admissions exam the second time round, and in addition to that, I feel like my personal statement was definitely stronger, because I
Mhm.
had more to talk about with the year out. I'd done a few more things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Because I'm trying to say is when people look at the headlines, which I said at the start, people don't recognize the journey that you've had to go on.
And I love that you say that, because it's just how we are in society, where somebody's achieved success and we just celebrate that, but we don't recognize that, to be successful, you have to have a resilient spirit. You have to learn how to navigate through seeming failure and not give up at the hurdle. Because even though, like, I've achieved a lot for my age, in the background, there have been so many different challenges I've been navigating through and fighting through, and people don't see all of that. And actually, some of our so-called failures or setbacks are the best things that could ever happen to us, because they refine our character, develop us, give us the skill set required for us to even get better in the future. And I went on that journey of having to reframe my mind concerning seeming failure or setbacks, because everything happens for a reason. That's what I believe anyway. And in retrospect, I'm glad I had a gap year. I had a whale of a time during my gap year.
Give us a little glimpse, just a little glimpse of what you did during your gap year.
So one opportunity I got that was so amazing. So I don't know if you know the band back in the day called Boney M, and they
Yeah.
sing Daddy, Daddy, ooh. Anyways,
You're a singer too. I have to put that on the list.
the lead singer of that is called Liz Mitchell.
Yeah.
She and her husband, I don't know if they still do it, but they used to do this thing where they would fund about 15 to 20 people of Black heritage, Black Afro-Caribbean heritage, go into the Gambia to reconnect you with your roots and show you things. And I remember getting an email about it, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I put my name forward, and they put it in a hat, and I got chosen. So I went on that trip. I worked as a lifeguard. I volunteered for Doctors of the World in a clinic in East London, where I was coming across vulnerable people like undocumented migrants, asylum seekers, victims of sex trafficking, and trying to help them get registered with GPs because they struggle. And as an 18-year-old, that was so eye-opening for me, because I'd never considered that there were a whole group of people that don't have access to free NHS healthcare, and that are like in a country with developed cancer or other things that they're not getting treatment for. And so as a young person, that massively matured me. And yeah, I just had a really kind of character refining and self-development type of experience during that gap year.
Fantastic. What was medical school like? And
Yeah.
because I know that you getting into medical school kind of like inspired some of the things which then you've gone on to
Mm.
do. So what was medical school like for you?
Medical school was overall, it was a great experience. It was challenging. I remember getting into medical school thinking, wow, I've got in, but now I need to get through. And I remember questioning if I'd even be able to do it. But no, medical school it was a great experience, a very long experience. After my second year of medical school, that's when I started my charity work.
Mhm.
I came across an article by the British Medical Association called The Right Mix, which highlighted that across the UK, half of the schools do not produce a single medical applicant. And across UK medical schools, less than 5% of the cohorts are coming from the most disadvantaged backgrounds. And I remember reading that thinking, oh my goodness, I knew there was a lack of diversity, but when you read statistics and you realize how much of a minority you really are, it just frustrated me because I was thinking one of the world's best oncologists or surgeons could be in a underrepresented area where they're not having equal access to certain opportunities. And just because of that their talent and potential is not being cultivated. And coming from the background I came from or come from, and with all of the support I had received and yet still found it challenging to get into medical school, I just felt like I want to do something. And so
Yeah.
I initially set up just a small medical outreach program, which then eventually evolved into the charity. And then I went on an exciting journey after that.
So tell me about that little setup, because it's from small acorns that great oak trees grow. So the
Yeah.
fundamentals of what it was that you were developing, tell us a little bit about that
Mm.
and what you were doing.
I think the honest truth is that I'd be lying if I said that at the age of 23 or 22, I had a vision to create a charity. That wasn't it. I had frustration inside of me and I wanted to do something.
Mhm.
So I set up this small medical outreach program. I went to a lady who was the former CEO of a charity at the time called the Power List that used to run a leadership program. And I did the 2.5 day leadership program. And I went to her afterwards and I said, Veronica, would you mentor me? I've got this idea. You come from a charity background, and I'd really love to see what we can do with this. So she helped to kind of guide me for the medical outreach program. And I went to my old secondary school sixth form and delivered it to their year 11 students, about 8 of them. And I realized that trying to help these people get into medical school, often by that stage, they don't have the right grades, their communication skills are underdeveloped, they just don't have the skill set required to make them competitive medical applicants. And I can't remember who I spoke to at my uni, but they said, why don't you apply for some funding to do a bit more with your outreach program, a bit of research alongside it. So I applied and I got an £890 grant. And that allowed us to go into 3 schools. And this time we did the program with younger students so we could plant a seed early. And around that time, a friend tagged me on a post on Facebook, which was linked to the Queen's Young Leaders Program, which was a program that ran from 2014 to 2018. And it selected about 60 young people from across the Commonwealth who were doing community work. And I applied for it. To my surprise, I was selected. Then from that, I had another kind of short leadership program, got an award from the Queen, the late Her Majesty the Queen, and that allowed us to then get the kind of gravitas we need to start getting people started taking us seriously. And I was able to register as a charity, and lots of other stuff happened after that.
No. You know what? What got me there, right, was the way that you just dropped it in. Yeah. You know what? I went and met the late Queen, and me and Liz are just like this, But that's amazing. That's
Thank you.
amazing, and that's why I asked the question about from that small seed. You didn't know what it was going to grow into. It
No,
might not
no
have grown
idea.
at all. You didn't
Exactly.
know. Yeah. But
Yeah.
you trusted, and you actually it developed into
Yeah.
something which was much bigger.
And what was funny as well, Wayne, is that along that journey, I felt so isolated because I couldn't I couldn't relate to anybody that was like me. Like I knew other medical students that were doing extra projects, but I didn't know anybody like me who was studying at medical school, trying to create and run a charity, and also doing all these extra kind of speaking engagements, which were often linked to my charity, raising awareness, etc. And I was getting worried because it was impacting my grades. And I remember at one point I was thinking, should I really continue with this? Because how can I be setting up a charity to help people get into medical school and then be compromising my ability to potentially succeed at medical school?
Yeah.
Then it wouldn't make sense, because I wouldn't be a doctor. Like, it wouldn't be good for the charity. So I had to really kind of have moments where I was thinking, should I be doing this? How am I going to do this, etc. Thankfully, I did pass all my exams first time round, and I'm so grateful for that, because it was a challenging, and I did see my grades dropping. So it's not that it didn't take some effect, it did. And as a medical student, trying to straddle if I should be doing both of these things was challenging at times.
You see, that's, you raise a really brilliant point there. And that is oftentimes that those people who are looking at making a, excuse me, a difference because they can see the inequalities which are around them, it's almost like a double taxation. Yeah. Because you're doing your work, which you want to get recognized for. I mean, so your studies, you want to get the best in your studies, but
Yeah.
at the same time, you want to right this inequality. And
Yeah.
without, something has to give. And
Yeah.
it's whether or not you're happy to say, okay, I'll allow my grades to drop because I see a bigger purpose in what
Yeah.
I'm doing. And it's
Yeah.
hard. It's
And,
hard to.
that was hard, because medical students inherently are very, they often tend to be people that define themselves by their academics, by their accolades, by their grades. And I'll never forget, I remember seeing my grades were dropping. So I decided to pull back from my charity a bit more for this specific year of medical school. And I remember seeing that even though I had passed the year, the next year when I did pull back, I got one decile lower than what I got the year before. And I remember praying, saying, God, how does this make sense? I've even pulled back and my grades are still dropping. And I just remember being so scared, thinking, what am I doing?
Mhm.
But it did work out in the end.
That's brilliant. And you got to see the Queen. And no, I'm just saying, right? Is the thing about it is what man proposes, God may dispose of, right?
Mm,
That's how I see it. And I see that you trusting in him gave you above and beyond what you thought you could have. Does that make sense?
absolutely. Yeah. It's amazing, because when I think back, like when I was 16 or 15, my heart yearned so desperately to become a doctor. And with the like experience and knowledge I had at that stage, for me, that was like the epitome of success. That was like, that is it. But now to see all else that has happened on my journey, I'm just like, wow, it's so amazing how you can have one kind of viewpoint of what you want, but so much more can open up to you if you just follow your heart and you just
Mhm.
take risk and listen to the thing that you're passionate about inside. Because I think it goes back to the point you discussed earlier, where lots of people get stirred up inside for something, but they talk themselves out of it and they're scared to act on these realities. And it doesn't come without challenge. I remember there was a guy that I was talking to about my charity work while I was at medical school, and he was like a plastic surgeon in his country. He'd come to the UK for some training, so the hierarchy was he was above me. And when I was telling him a bit about my stuff, he was just talking down, saying, you know, make sure you just focus on your work, making me feel like it was all nonsense. And if I had listened to voices like that, who at that time was somebody I was seeing as above me, then none of this would have ever happened. So you
Mhm.
will have the naysayers or people that are going to look down. But when you've got a strong conviction, you know, you have to trust in that and run with it, because, you know, it's actually coming against those barriers and pushing through them that tests the strength of the conviction that you have anyway, because everything will be tested in life.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I want us to go a little bit deeper into your charity, right? And some of the opportunities that what your charity is offering for other people, but also what that charity has done for you as an individual, right?
Mm.
So give us an outline of what the how you went about setting up the charity, advice you received, etc., supporters, champions who
Yeah.
helped you along that way.
So the lady Veronica Martin, who I asked to mentor me, she had experience of setting up a charity in the past.
Mhm.
So I asked her again to talk me through that whole process. And I also connected with somebody who I had done the leadership course with. We both got invited to a dinner. and we sat on that table next to each other, and he asked me, what have you been up to? And I said, oh, I've been working on this kind of project idea. And he said, oh, that sounds really interesting, we should have a chat. And we had a chat, and then from there we started working together, and he then co-founded the charity with me. And he wasn't a medical student, but he had a very strategic business kind of mind. So coupled with my skill set, we just became such a strong synergistic team where we just worked really well together. And he also had such a strong drive like me. It's really interesting because he came from a totally different background to me, but he understood the work, he understood the need, he understood why it was so important, and he just felt moved. And so I call these people destiny partners, because you can't pay somebody to be doing their full-time job and then coming back home and being on like Zoom calls with you for hours. I remember there was a season in our life where we'd literally be on Zoom every single day, and like all we would talk about is the charity. My sister would be like, you guys are such geeks, that's all you ever talk about. I don't even hear any other conversation happening. And as we were doing that, we were building the foundation. So I'd say that certainly joining forces with someone else was critical, having that mentorship and that guidance, and also not being afraid to ask. I remember asking somebody to give me match funding if I got a grant, and they agreed to it, and that helped us to get our first injection of cash, which allowed us to hire our first staff member. So yeah, it required a combination of things.
Oh, you know what, you say it so not matter of factly, because it's not matter of factly, but you say it with such conviction and confidence. Did you always have this conviction and confidence that this was going to work?
No, I mean, I think that, as I said, initially it was just the outreach program. Then we were like, okay, let's make it a charity. But then as we were getting traction, I don't really know how to describe it. I guess I did believe it would work. Yes, I did. We had a big vision that we were working towards. We didn't know how we would get there, but we just believed in the vision. We knew it couldn't be impossible, and we just were going to keep working towards it. I think also I had a strong conviction that if it's God that's empowering me to do this, he will make it succeed. All I have to do is do my part. Like there's a scripture in the Bible that says faith without works is dead. And so I'm like, God, if I'm doing my part, you have to do your part. So I just use that formula.
I like that you held God accountable to his word. That's what I like that. To tell me, let's go into the nitty-gritty of your charity then. What is it that your charity does? What is the objective? What's the vision that you've got within the charity?
So the charity exists to increase diversity across UK medical schools, specifically trying to increase the number of students that are coming from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds and low socioeconomic backgrounds. And we try to do this by removing the barriers that are currently restricting and stopping these students from entering medical school. I've realized from that outreach program I did when I first started in my old secondary school sixth form that trying to develop a student who's going to be a competitive medical applicant is not something you can do in a week's inspiration or 1 day's worth of inspiration, which is what a lot of current medical schools outreach programs do. They either focus on doing short-term interventions or focusing loads of their energy and resources on sixth formers who are already showing that they're on track to potentially getting in. And I thought that's unfair, because really we need to be giving all students a chance. And in order to do that, you've got to start by planting a seed younger. So we quickly realized that we want a model that is focused on a long-term continuous intervention that would support students at each of the key stages. So give them the time to develop that confidence, to develop their communication skills, their critical thinking, etc. Because many of these students are intelligent. So if they apply themselves, they can get the grade. But if they can't communicate effectively in an interview, etc., that's going to massively impact them, especially if the people interviewing them have unconscious bias and other things. They need to be able to communicate in a way that is sadly more palatable to those kind of interviewees to help them get the points that they need to get into medical school.
So what age group do you start with? At what age?
Year eights and nines.
Year
Year
eights
eight,
and nines.
basically. Yeah.
Year eights and nines. Okay, so just before them then doing their selections of
GCSEs.
their
Yeah.
GCSEs. So they've shown some potential, so you bring them through. And how long would somebody who you've engaged with how long does that engagement last?
So so we have Armitage juniors, Armitage seniors, and we're developing Armitage scholars, which should hopefully launch next year or the end of this year. And each program is a 2-year program. So juniors would work with years 8s and 9s, seniors years 10 and 11s, and scholars will be the sixth form program. Juniors is very non-selective. So any student that's showing some kind of interest that fits the demographics can partake. And the idea is to show them what medicine is, to help them to see the possibilities that are out there, to build their confidence, etc. Then that student theoretically could then go to the seniors and then to the scholars if they decide they want to continue. But also at each stage, a student can join. So a student in seniors doesn't have to have done juniors, or a student that wants to join scholars doesn't have to have done the previous programs. But that's what the model looks like.
So do you I'm quizzing you on it now, but do you partner up with different medical schools? Are you
Yes,
in?
so we have a hubs and spokes model. So we partner with a medical school, then we use their medical students, which we call medic ambassadors, to go into the local schools to deliver the program. So at present, we've been working with St. George's, with King's, and also with the University of Nottingham. To kind of deliver programs based on that model. In terms of like our future ambitions is to have also a digital platform, which will mean that students who maybe are not closely located to a medical school, or students that are just logistically, it will be difficult to access them, can still get some kind of support virtually. Because with the current model that we have in person, it does limit our breadth of reach.
Yeah. So you're actually thinking about, in terms of your long-term modeling and future-proofing your program, you've got some alternative approaches to reach as wide an audience as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah. Fantastic. So how I'm just thinking, how do you think that has changed you when you've been designing this, right? Because you can't do something without it changing you in some way. Do you think it's, yeah? Do you see what I mean?
Definitely. I think it's wow, it almost feels like you give birth to a child and you're nurturing it and growing it and developing it. And as you say, that changes you internally. I think it's taught me to be more resilient, because balancing this alongside medical school, working as a junior doctor, etc., it challenged me in terms of, are you truly passionate about this? Are you truly going to make this work? Because you're having to balance so many different things. It also challenged me in terms of opening up doors to platforms where I've had to challenge fear, because somebody's invited me to speak on a big stage that I'm like, oh my God, I don't feel qualified to do this, etc. It's challenged me in terms of helping me to think about issues very broadly. Like, the problem is sometimes when you identify an issue and you start working on it, as you start digging that, you realize that, oh my God, this is like an iceberg. It's so much bigger than what I initially thought. And that can make you feel very overwhelmed. And at moments I did have that, because it's like, okay, we're trying to increase access to medical schools, but actually, even when these students get into medical school, they have struggle getting through. They don't perform as well as their counterparts. When they then become doctors, they still have struggle getting to consultancy level. Then you start to see, actually, there are systematic issues that even if I try to do as best as I can, if those issues don't change as well, then there's still going to be a challenge. And so those things can start to feel really overwhelming, and you've got to be able to just pull back, take things step by step, and know that we may not be able to change the entire world, but we can make steps towards that, and that is enough. And also as well, I'd say that it's felt at times like a burden, because my identity, I felt like, has sometimes been attached to being a doctor or being the co-founder of a charity or doing this and doing that. And even though they're an extension of who I am, they don't make me. My value is not in any of these things. So being able to also just kind of stay rooted in who I am and what my value is based on, and separate it from these things. And also just being able to learn how to get that work-life balance and just step back. I'd say having a charity and some of the other things that I do alongside working as a doctor has forced me to kind of practice that.
Wow. You know what? There's a number of things which you said, and one of the things which kind of like jumped into my head as you were saying them. So you spoke about the challenge of the whole pipeline, going through the pipeline and saying that it's beyond you to fix the entire pipeline, right? So have you connected with, or do you know of any partnering organizations where we can then start to build a pipeline? So it's not just, excuse me, it's not just down to you. If we get a team of individuals with the
Yeah.
same kind of mindset, same kind of vision, which we can then
Yeah.
piggyback and work together to make something even better.
Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
been
I
in
think
collaboration
that
or spoken?
that partnership and collaboration is critical to your point and everything you've just said for those reasons. At present, there have been some organizations we've spoken to, but we're not at a stage where we've properly partnered with organizations to address some of the other things. I think when you're a charity or small, or we're quite small, and you've got limited resources,
Yeah.
so knowing how to use the little that you have to make the most impact and what areas to focus on in which season is something that's become quite important and what we're focusing on. And I think at the moment, because because we're still building, say, the scholars program, we're just trying to focus on really stabilizing our internal structure and what we do, before kind of focusing on doing any massive, or not massive, but any kind of big projects with other partners. We want partners at present to help support us with what we're doing so we can get that established. But definitely I've been to different kind of places where I've had conversations that are to a broader audience looking at issues in education or other things. And that's been an opportunity to kind of hear from different people and share your part. But definitely, I think in the future, partnerships is something that we really want to be a lot more intentional about making happen, because to your point, like, you need to partner with other institutions and organizations to achieve your purpose.
I'm going to switch it up now very slightly, right? I don't know if anyone else has got questions. If they do, put your hand up and I'll come to you in a second, right? But one of the things that I was going to ask you was about who looks after you? If you're so busy looking after all of these other things, who's looking after you?
Yeah. I love that question because it reminded me of something so key, which is the power of relationships. If there's one thing I've been so grateful for along this journey, is that my charity has allowed me to meet some of the most amazing individuals that I would have never met if it had not been for the work that I'm doing. And when you kind of meet these people who you cultivate good relationships with, that becomes so critical, because they are the people that, speak life into me, that empower me, that I can go to when I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm like, this issue feels bigger than what I can handle. And you need that, because even on a day when you may feel tired or you may be disgruntled by something, the paradigm through which you may view a challenge from could be so wrong. And you need to go and call someone who's going to answer the phone to give you a different perspective and to help you navigate through. So I'd say definitely having those good relationships in my life is important. Also trying to be disciplined with making sure I'm looking after my body. So going to the gym, eating right, etc. My faith is crucial to me, praying for strength to keep going and wisdom. And I'd say just kind of trusting the process and just trusting God is what helps me to try to maintain that mental state of peace. Because I think the reality is we live in a life or a world where you're constantly have a million reasons to worry, because negativity is constantly bombarding our mind, and trying to develop that mental discipline of having peace, trusting the process, taking it day by day, is something I'm constantly practicing as well, but it helps.
You've got wisdom beyond your years. That's all I'm going to say. You've got wisdom beyond your years. I haven't seen anyone else put their hand up to say about asking any further questions. I'm just looking at the time. So I'm going to ask my two normal final questions. And those questions are, what advice would you have given to your younger self? And the second part of the question is, what would your younger self look at you now and say, wow?
I think the advice I would have given to my younger self is, I would have just reassured myself that you're actually doing great. Like, stop putting so much pressure on yourself and just trust trust in the dreams that you have in your heart, and just try to enjoy the process more. I think that I spent so much time stressing about stuff that I didn't even need to stress about, you know. And to be fair, it's like you give yourself that advice, and even though I can say that to my younger self, sometimes it's almost like a passage of rites where you've got to go through that to learn to not stress, you know. So that's kind of what I would say to my younger self. But by the same token, I'm like, I needed to go through that to learn that. But no, that is what I would encourage my younger self. I think in terms of what I would say, wow, I would say wow to my whole life. And when I say that, I'm not trying to say that in a cocky way, because I know it's literally, I believe it's, you know, the grace of God on my life that has empowered me to do all I do, because I couldn't have done it by myself. You know, many people have ideas for charities, and it doesn't mean they meet the Queen. It doesn't mean they get all these other opportunities. I cannot say that that's because of my excellence or brilliance. Yes, I have determination. I have a level of intelligence. I do my best, but I can't say that that was just me, you know? So I would just, yeah, I think I'd just be mesmerized by everything. Because as I said, my burning heart desire was just to be a doctor. I had no idea that I'd author a book, that I would meet the Queen, that I'd stand on some of the stages that I've stand on, that I would meet some of the incredible people I've met and have the conversations, be invited to some of the things that I've been invited to. You know, I would have never imagined it.
And now I said it was my final two questions, but you just said something, right? Which I've ordered your book. Can you give me a spoiler
Yes.
of what's in the what can I it should have been here already. It hasn't yet arrived, right?
I
So
give you
give
a
me a
spoiler.
spoiler alert.
So the book's called The Power of a Dream. The first part of the book shares my story, and then the second part of the book shares 7 strategies to help people transform their dreams from ideas into realities. And the purpose of the book is to empower you to let go of fear, to empower you to know that there's a seed of greatness that exists in every single person, that your combination of your character, you know, your personality, your skill set is unique to you. And the book's designed to help you to look introspectively, recognize your greatness, and then unapologetically have that boldness to share it with the world. Because actually we have a duty to do that, because the way you can help someone, Wayne, even through doing this podcast, the way I can help someone as Leanne is different to how Donald Palmer can help someone, or Naomi Mitchell, or Eric. And so we have a responsibility to use our gifts and our talents to serve the world. And my book's designed to spark that seed inside of you and to give you the confidence and the boldness to start using your gift to do that.
Donald's just coming. You name checked him, and he's stepped on the
Well, yeah,
stepped on the
you can't just name
platform.
check me and think. Thank you for name checking me. I mean, Leanne, what you don't know what you do is you give, and I know I've got my dearest friend like Professor Jason Hardy and Dr. Dwayne Neal OBE, and I'm sure they're going to share this in the sentiment. You give us encouragement and inspire in the sense of the next generation of young people. Man, you're talented. I wanted to ask a question, and I mean, this is what I meant with your boldness. I mean, no way would I ever think of writing a book. I mean, what made you? And I may have missed this. Apologies, but what made you write your book?
I think I always had a desire to write a book from a young age. From the age of 17, I remember really strongly thinking about, I need to write a book. But it's something that stayed inside of me, but I didn't really know where to start. And in lockdown, I did start typing a book, but I just got stuck at about maybe, it wasn't even 10,000 words. I wrote a certain amount of words, but I just got stuck, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And my sister has written a book actually. And my sister's a bit like, that kind of energy. So she was like, come on, Leanne, you need to write your book. And she kind of was just like, go and get this book coach. Because she had a book coach that she worked with. And so I just got that book coach. I said, okay, I'm going to make this happen within 3 months. And, you know, the book coach helped me to develop a structure. Once I had the structure, I then started just piercing through it and just making it happen. So that's kind of it in short, how I made it happen.
Well,
The
one
power
more
of the
thing.
dream.
I just got to say, and as Wayne mentioned it, I think we're going to interview your sister, who sounds incredible. but I listen, I've got to take a hat off. And as Jason, Professor Hardy says, Leanne, I've come across some remarkable people in my life, Wayne Donald included, Thank you, Jason. But
Thank you.
you might just be up there with the best and very best. You're
Wow.
remarkable, honest, and I am blown away. And I can only say
Thank
yes.
you.
No. And by the way, glad you went to St. George's. St. George's seems to be a hotbed of talented people coming out of there wanting to make change. I don't know if it is St. George's, but I met a young black medic who he noted that medical textbooks around dermatology,
Yeah, Malone.
and he then made a difference.
Yeah.
Met a group of young black women who set up something similar to yours, but slightly different, called Melanin Medics.
Yeah.
Wanted to make a change. Met a doctor, Ashton. He wanted, I don't know what it is. There's something about St. George's and the black folks that go there that want to make change. No, thank you.
Thank you.
Like Joseph's come in with a question as well. Thank you, Donald.
Yeah, Dr. Leanne, thank you
Hi,
very much
Joseph.
for
Thank you.
hello. Yeah, thank you very much for that inspiring story. Mine is actually not a question, it's a statement you made. Like what you said when you got to having gotten bursary to go to a school, you felt this kind of imposter syndrome, like as if you're
Yeah.
not good enough to be in a place. Yes, I think that resonated with me, you know. But one of the lessons I pick up from such experience is the fact that those other people that have to be there, they were there on the back of their parents, right?
Exactly.
Now, it's their parents that had the resources to be able to sponsor them to such a place.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but you got there on the back of your own abilities and effort.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of places you on a level that's far above every other person that's in that place, because given the circumstances you were in,
Yeah.
you know, so that's how I tend to see it. And that's very, very, I mean, that becomes a little bit much more empowering when you see it from that
Absolutely.
perspective.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
knowing full well that, yeah, this is the situation, right?
Mm.
If not for the effort I've put in by myself, you know,
Mm-hmm.
based on my own ability, I wouldn't have gotten here.
Yeah.
Right. So if we approach it from that perspective, it empowers us, you know, to kind of, to look beyond the circumstances surrounding us. And I think I should applaud you for that.
Thank you. That's very encouraging. I agree with everything you've said.
Yeah.
Yes. You know what? They say all good things have to come to an end, and I don't want this one to end, right?
Yeah.
I don't want this one to end. So I'm gonna put out a shout out on this one, because I've already invited Leanne to come to the Black Graduates Career Conference at the end of June, right? And she will be there in person. She'll have her books. So I am putting a plug out for all those who would like to come and see Leanne in person, to have a discussion with her, to be further inspired by her, then please come out on the 28th of June to the Black Graduates Career Conference at Imperial College, because she's going to be there in person. All right. So I'm definitely going to be there now. Leanne, you are God blessed. Amen. God has blessed you. He's given you a purpose. And you know what? When you stay within his purpose, there's nothing that anybody else can do, right, that can prevent you from fulfilling what he wants in your life, right? And what you're doing is making a difference to so many people. Just the people who are on the platform today, we're all blown away, right? That, as Professor Art, if you know Jason's story, if he said that he's blown away by your story, his story is powerful, your story is powerful, but that's the beauty of this platform, that we bring powerful stories together. Yeah. And so I want to just say thank you for what you're doing. We're going to continue to connect, because I want to try and introduce you to some people to see what we can do, because you are an inspiration. All right. And it's beautiful to have you with us. All right.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been wonderful spending this afternoon with you all. Thank you. I'm grateful.
Right. I'm just going to let people know what's going to be happening next week. So next week, we're going to have a lady called Aliyah Kai. and she is a advanced research fellow in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Imperial College. And she's done some amazing things around concrete. So please tune in. It's back at our usual time of 12:30 till 1:30. Okay. And if you have missed any of the previous guests, Donald himself has been here, Dwayne, also Jason have all contributed their stories. Please go to thetinyurl.com/belonging-IAO and you'll be able to hear those stories as well. And I just want to finally say, if it wasn't for the willingness of these beautiful people to share their stories, to help us to gain a better insight, then we wouldn't have been able to experience how they've gained their sense of identity and sense of belonging. Thank you very much for joining us this week, and have a good weekend, and I will see you again next week. Thank you.